I'm currently working on the book version of my Chessable course, The Anti-Sicilians for Black. So this is a repertoire for Black against all those systems where White declines to play the open Sicilian. So, for example, the Rossolimo, which we're going to be looking at in a moment, the Alapin, the Grand Prix attack, the Mora, and much, much more. So what I'm doing in the book version is tweaking some of my original recommendations on the Chessable course, just improving them a little bit in the light of experience, but also including suggestions that were made from the comments put on the Chessable course. And at the moment I'm selecting and writing up the model games. Now the model games section is a really important part of this course, or this book as it will be. It's all very well, knowing these variations that I recommend, but of course you also have to understand the positions, and that's what I'm trying to get across with these model games. And I'm giving you an idea of typical strategies and themes in these positions. And I recently came across this game. So this is Sergei Karyakin against Veselin Topalov, played in the World Cup Blindfold Rapid event in Bilbao in 2007. Blindfold Rapid, wow. Well, we can't expect perfect games under those circumstances. However, Topalov did play really, really well. So let's just go from the beginning again. E4. And it's a Sicilian, and instead of the open Sicilian, Karyakin plays the Rossolimo, which is a very sound opening. Knight f6. So this is my recommendation against the Rossolimo. The idea is to challenge White's centre pawn right from the word go, and that forces White to commit in a certain way. And then to develop on the king side really rapidly. Because one of the problems here is that the king is quite a long way from castling compared to White. So you have to be very careful against the Rossolimo. Knight c3, so that's the most popular move, defending the pawn. And g6, so quick development. Bishop g7 and castles kingside. Here Karyakin took on c6. One of the other main lines is to play e5 and to send this knight around the houses and then here. But actually this knight comes back into play via f5 to the outpost on d4, and actually black is absolutely fine there. Or if g4, stopping that, then after bishop g7 you're going to castle and play f6 and the knight comes back to f7. I rather like it when they go g4 because actually that's quite a weakening move. Anyway, that's another story. You can check that out on the course if you want. But Karyakin plays bishop takes knight on c6, which is one of the other main lines. Recapturing the d pawn is really important because it lets out this bishop, which wants to go to g4 because actually black is a little congested. So that's why White plays h3. I know I've got a thing about that move, but actually in this case it's very sensible because this bishop could be better. Bishop g7, d3 and castle. So job done. The king is safe on the king side out of the centre. Now it's interesting that White keeps the pawn chain like this. So if that pawn advances, it's a bit like in the Berlin endgame. Actually, it allows black to use those f5 and d5 squares. So Karyakin's policy is to keep that pawn chain intact. And that makes it a little bit more difficult for black to sort of get a handle on White's position. And Karyakin plays very aggressively. He's looking to castle queenside. Now, if White isn't playing e5, then black can play e5. Point is that knight takes pawn on e5 can be met by knight takes e4, and you get the pawn back, and black is fine there. Bishop h6, yeah, exchanging off those bishops just weakens black's king a little bit. And queen d6. In this case, the pawn needed defending. And it's good to bring the queen up the board, just a little bit more active. This position has been very, very popular, actually. I mean, there are hundreds of games played from this position in top class chess, actually. I think players playing white find this attractive because, well, you castle queenside and king seems pretty safe here. You have a regular pawn structure, and you can start to attack on the king side playing g4 with a clear conscience because the king isn't on the king side. But practice has shown that black is absolutely fine here. Well, we've got a sharp position with kings on opposite wings, and standard practice is to start hurling your pawns down the board to try to open up the position or try to create some weakness. So a5 is an excellent idea. And white excuse me, starts in the same way on the king side. And a4. So it can be very useful just to prise open the position. And if white plays a3, then of course black will play b5, b4 and open up the b file. So knight e2. So this knight is swinging around to the king side where it looks quite menacing. Now, I'd like you to have a think in this position. I mean, there are several attractive moves for black. But how would you play with black? And if you spot Topalov's next move, I will be very, very impressed. I think there are far more obvious moves, but Topalov comes up with a really fascinating strategy. I have to say, it's not the one that would spring to my mind, but it certainly is really interesting. Very deep, actually. Anyway, black to play. How would you play here? I'll give you a little moment to think about this. You can always pause the video. Black to play. What's your first thought? Well, one could push again, and white always has to take care that there isn't some kind of incursion with the queen down here. But I think there's no need to commit to that. It does close the position a little bit. So, I mean, it's possible though. b5 would be my first thought, to storm this one down the board, because you still have the option to play a3, but you might also break things open with b3. And this has been played before. Peter Lecco has played like this, for example. It looks really natural to me. And I think it's a good move. I guess you could bring the bishop out. But I think the king would step to the side. That's possible. Now, did any of you think of Topalov's move rook a7? Be honest. Write to me in the comments if you actually thought about rook a7. Wouldn't occur to me, but this is a really deep idea. So Kuryakin puts the knight on g3. And Topalov swings the rook over to e7. Really interesting, just bolstering this pawn. So why is he playing like this? Well, one thing is, the rook on the 7th rank helps to protect the king. For example, let's have a look at knight f5 check. In this variation, you always have to watch out for this sacrifice, because it'll open up the king, opens up the g file. And now, there's a very common defensive idea in these kind of positions. I should emphasize this did not happen. So black can defend with knight g8. Really good move. Very common actually in this kind of position. The knight covers not only h6, but also the square it just came from, f6. And when white starts attacking, for example rook g4, hoping to double, then f6. Now you can see that rook comes into play on the 7th rank, these squares are covered. The rook on f8 covers g8. The knight covers these squares. Black's king is perfectly safe. And actually, black should win this one with an extra piece. Time to open up the position, just to simplify. So that's one point of playing the rook to the 7th rank. But why move it to e7? Well, it's all about defending that pawn. Karyakin played g5, so this is the game. And the knight swings around to e8. So you can see that with g5 being played, then it's not, you can't defend the e-pawn with f6. And with the rook on e7, basically it preempts this attack with queen c3 attacking the pawn on e5. And this knight just slips round and all is fine. In fact, Karyakin played queen c3 here anyway, but it's not a good move, as we'll soon see. I think here white should be consistent and play something like rook g1. But actually, okay, first of all, let's throw that one in. f6. Black gets really good counterplay on the f-file. Again, this is quite a common theme, that black is ready with the major pieces to attack, because after g4, these squares have been weakened. Black has excellent counterplay. It's interesting that white was attacking on the king side, but actually black switches it round, and black takes the initiative on that side of the board. Still, I think white should try to complicate in some way on the king side. But queen c3, remember, it's a blindfold rapid game, and this is actually a waste of time, because Topalov played knight c7. And this is such a typical theme in this variation of the Rossolimo, that this knight bounces round and gets to the outpost on d4. So you can see the queen just has to go back. a3. So here, absolutely appropriate, because you can see the knight and the queen might be able to come in on these squares. White's king position looking very drafty now. And f6. So you can see this knight is going to be attacked, and once it moves, then the queen can come in on these squares, and the knight does a beautiful job of controlling c3. So white can't play c3. So yeah, excellent move, f6. Yeah, for example, if pawn takes, the knight moves back, queen d4, and boom, the queen is in. So that's why Karyakin plays c4, but he's in desperate trouble now. And there we go, knight d4. In my Kalashnikov course, when the knight goes to d4, I describe this as the Trojan horse. It often causes enormous problems for white. Sometimes you give up a pawn, sometimes it just manages to stay there, sometimes creates a passed pawn. And this is perhaps the most common idea in the anti-Sicilians, this knight on d4, not just in the Rossolimo, but in so many variations where that knight hits the outpost and causes incredible problems for white. And in the Rossolimo, it gets to d4 in so many different ways. Well, I showed you right at the start of the game where the knight came round to h6 and then reached d4. In other positions, it goes via d5 to c7 to e6 and then b5. Sometimes e8, c7, e6, d4. And in this case, it went e8, c7, like that. b5, d4. Black has a winning position. So let's just see how it finished. Takes on f6. The knight came back to e1. Knight f3. So it's just about clearing the way for the pieces to come in. And you can see d3 is in trouble as well. Rook f7. There we are. Doubling on the f-file. So f2 is weak. Rook f3. Oops, something's caving in. Knight h5. This is a last desperate attack from white. But superb communication with that rook on the 7th. It's doing a really good job. Queen takes d3, and of course this is now completely lost. White's king has no defense. And here Karyakin resigned. Well, we can go to mate. Mate follows shortly, I think, as they say in the books. There we go, Queen c2. Great strategy from Veselin Topalov. Rook a7, such an unusual move, but you can see that the rook was absolutely beautifully placed on e7, ready to counter-attack according to how white pursued the attack on the king side. And of course, typical theme, if you get a chance to storm that pawn down the board, do so. And then we had another theme, typical theme in this opening, that the knight reached that beautiful outpost on d4, the Trojan horse. There you go. I will be working away on the book over the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping to finish it soon. It should be published, I think, in the early summer, but that all depends on the schedule. It's the publisher, New in Chess. Anyway, I shall keep you posted. Thanks for watching.